All right, it's Jeff Mayhew. It's John Beatty. It's Politics and Parenting, where we talk about politics, but we talk about it differently. John, how are you doing today?
Doing really well, Jeff. This as the Christmas season is coming into full swing. We're also ramping up at the Beatty household. We got a Christmas tree yesterday. We were supposed to get it today, but with the prediction of the rain, we jumped the gun and went a day early. But there was a Christmas parade in Percival. I got a chance to walk a wooden camel through the streets of Percival, so that was fun. But it's good. It's a nice peaceful Sunday as we kind of wind down the year. So, how are you?
I am good. I'm tired. It is the busiest time of the year for my business and doing double duty, getting up at 5 and going to the office and then going back at the end of the night and then working on weekends. And I'm just not a young man anymore, John. My body is tired.
No, no, and that story of growth kind of reminds me of "It's a Wonderful Life," which you had written about last year. It was a nice piece. And when I read your article, I was like, yeah, I like the movie "It's a Wonderful Life." And then last night in the discussion, one of the members of my household, I won't name names, but said that this person said that they had never seen "It's a Wonderful Life." And I was shocked. So I said, well, we should watch it. And I realized this is probably the first time I'd watched it, and it had to been over like 15 years because I remember like the general storyline, but it's like your article says you read it, watched it 1,000 times, and like I can see that because it's got so much nuance and so many like it's a great story overall, story of sort of a man kind of realizing like he's done a lot of good, even though maybe the world doesn't recognize it, or by the worldly standards he hasn't recognized it, but there's just a lot of beauty and poetry and sort of real subtleness to it that I never picked up before. And I kind of felt multiple times like we're all kind of George Bailey's in a certain sense of we try to do what's right, and other people get accolades based on that, and the best response is to be happy for them and to sort of be content with where we are in life, because you never know like what the real impact of what we do is.
Yeah. I mean, I remember watching that movie in my grandfather's basement just like over and over again as a kid. And like you said, there's a lot of subtlety to that movie. George Bailey is this, almost heroic like figure, but he's just kind of a broken man. He's got the bum ear, things don't necessarily go his way. At times he seems like Superman, and then other times he's kind of like, I don't know, a little Bill Dotrey from King of the Hill, like, oh shucks, like what, why me type of situation. And the story is, it layers into like what we talk about with politics and populism and corporations and all that type of stuff, and then it kind of layers back into family and like community and surrounding the ones that you love and lifting them up and making sure they you show them gratitude and appreciation so they'd never feel like they won't be missed if they're gone, because ultimately that's where John or uh George found himself, didn't he?
Yeah, no, it's I mean, but like just getting to that point, like he's a man of dreams. Like he's got this dream of going on a big worldwide excursion after high school. Before he goes to college, he saved up money for it. I guess he'd been working for a couple of years after high school, but before he went to college, he wanted to do this thing. And then his father dies, and he realizes like he has to kind of put that on hold so he can help his family and the town of Bedford Falls. And then fast forward a couple years later, he sent his brother with that money that he had saved for college off to college, and he becomes a good football player. And then he gets married, and they're already going their honeymoon. They got $2,000 in hand, and it's just weird to think about $2,000 now, and that wouldn't pay for much on a honeymoon nowadays. But from in 19 what is it, probably 1930s at that point, like, or 20, it's probably 1920s. Like, there was a lot of good chunk of change. And then by the end of the day, it's all gone because he had to give it out to people so that he can save the building and loans, and keep families getting fed for a week while the banks closed. Um, just like, again, like having dreams and then those dreams falling short, and just kind of, I think, accepting it. And like there's a good part of society that doesn't want to accept bad things that happen, but you do kind of have to accept it and then make the best of it. And he does that. The the honeymoon night, his new wife gets the old house that she's always dreamed of, and it's a wreck, but they make the most of it. And I think like that's a real key to happiness in life, is making the most of what you get, because there's certainly so much that you can't control, and you just you do what you got to do.
Yeah, and you look back and you go, he had to use his honeymoon money to keep the banks open. Now just think about that statement for a second, to keep the banks open, right? Like how privileged are we in a society that that's not really something that we think about.
Mhm.
But that was something that happened regularly in American society. There were constantly panics or depressions or all these types of things. I mean, the economy is going to do this, right? And you know, while it may still be erratic and out of control at times, it's not nearly it doesn't happen as frequently anymore. You can say that's a good thing or a bad thing. But as American citizens, most of us have never had to, deal with the fact that like we just might not be able to have our money, like the banks just might not be open,
Yeah.
and that'll be a thing that we have to like live through.
No, I mean, it's amazing. Like you go to the bank and it says a $250,000 insurance from the FDIC. And then we saw like last year or was it this year? I guess this spring with the Silicon Valley Bank going under. And, there was a mechanism where that could be purchased like basically over the weekend by another bank, so that all the money that was in those bank accounts could be made available the next day. And it's like it is truly wonderful. And I think like it's so easy to just kind of like throw like, oh, regulation and oh, laws. It's just government seeping in there and taking control of our lives. But like there's kind of a balance to that, where like some regulation can be beneficial to society as a whole. And you imagine like if there wasn't a mechanism for a bank to be taken over the weekend, there wasn't a bank that was in a position to buy another smaller bank, like um, we could have been in another depression, or it would have hurt a lot of companies. And the specifically the Silicon Valley Bank, like that was interesting because it affected a very particular niche in the world, that actually has an outsized influence on how everyone lives and works with the technology industry in Silicon Valley. So, it may not have affected like you or I, because I don't have any money in Silicon Valley Bank, but it could have affected businesses and things that sort of would have had a bigger ripple effect for how the world operates. And just interesting in the same sense, like COVID. I was sitting in church today, and I'm looking at the dates, and we got the hymnal, and you can kind of like flip ahead to the next weeks, and one of the kids was messing with it and said like March of 2024, and I was like, oh man, that was 4 years ago. 4 years ago from March 2024 would have been March of 2020. And I just remember like just how crazy that month was, where the world just seemed to
Mm.
shut down. But here we are now. We made the most of that, for better, for worse.
Yeah, I mean, and that's crazy. And you think back, and you mentioned the Silicon Bank, kind of going under, and the mechanisms to buy the banks. I mean, that's kind of what happened. Where's this book here, Acts of Congress? We're talking about the '08 financial crisis, where we had a really big bank, too big to fail, right?
Mhm.
That was failing, and Congress and business had to like step up and kind of make sure that the banks were open, and making sure. I mean, there were members of Congress that were legitimately fearful that that George Bailey scenario was going to happen on their watch, and that shows, a couple of things, how maybe poorly they were doing at their watch.
Mhm.
The fact that it was that they got to a point where they thought it might happen. Yes, catastrophe averted, but for how long? And you have the subsequent legislation that gets put in afterwards that of course turned into a political fight, as opposed to actually working on that regulation that you mentioned earlier, where yes, we're not a fan of more rules and more regulation, but we also recognize that a little bit is good, like I tell my kids all the time. They would always ask me, my young ones, like, can we go outside and play? Can we go outside and play? And I would go, no, because daddy has to go outside and watch you. But we're going to get a fence in the spring. And once we get a fence, you can go out there. See, we put a little structure in, we put a little
Yeah.
fence, and we can and now I know where they are. I know they're not going to wander outside because, I got the fence gates locked and they're too small to get from, and so now they have a little bit more freedom, and that's kind of the way that we should like look at our rules and regulations. And you know I don't know. I don't know how this ties back to George Bailey. I got to bring it back to George Bailey, John. But well, actually, let's go back to Bailey and the building and loan and Mr. Potter. Mr. Potter was like he was kind of like the robber baron figure in the movie, wasn't he? He was the evil man who just wanted profit, who didn't really care about the people, and he caused the bank panic, didn't he?
Yeah, and that's kind of my understanding is that he calls a loan or something and basically takes all the money out of the bank, and then as you think about fractional reserves, like the bank owes $100 to everyone, but it only has like $10 in its vault, if in sort of as a percentage, or maybe $25. But you take that $25 out, and then someone needs to get money, and there's none available, and then everyone gets worried about the having money to buy bread for the next week, and so he sort of seemed it's thinly veiled that he seems like he engineers a lot of these panics, and then of course at the end he has the Uncle Billy loses the $8,000 that was supposed to get deposited, and he's kind of absent-minded, and it gets stuck in the paper. And Mr. Potter could have been a good guy and found Uncle Billy, but he peers through the door of his office and sees Uncle Billy rummaging through the trash, trying to find this $8,000, and then going back and retracing his steps. And he says nothing. I'm
Mm.
sorry, no, he doesn't say nothing. What he does is starts calling the press and calling
Yeah.
the DA and saying, "You gotta arrest George Bailey because he lost $8,000." And then later on, comes to him and asks for just a bridge loan, basically, to figure out. And Mr. Potter's like, "Nope, not happening." So he's just a ruthless man. And
But there's a lot of truth in that. There's a lot of truth that that's how our economy works in a lot of ways. If you look back before the building alone, the It's a Wonderful Lifetime period, and you go back to the Jackson administration and the fight that he had with the National Bank and Biddle, he was intentional about causing bank panics just to kind of wield his power against Jackson. And you know when you have people that are so intent on being right for whatever their thing is, and they wield their power to show that they're right, who gets hurt? George Bailey gets hurt. Like
right,
regular people get hurt. It's not Mr. Potter. Mr. Potter doesn't care. Nicholas Biddle doesn't care. Andrew Jackson doesn't care. Like we're little pawns in the game, and it's a shame that the system works that way in a lot of the ways. It's also good because, I mean, if you move that power, then you put the hands in somebody that's good, and you can kind of balance it back. Or even if what is good and what is bad, right? Like Nick Biddle's idea and Jackson's idea may have been different. They both might have been right. We will never really know because they just fought against each other. They
right.
should have sought compromise somewhere along the lines, and that would have been better probably for the people long term. I think I think it's Polk after Jackson's like big fight to destroy the National Bank. He actually puts forward legislation that kind of like has a happy medium, and we ride that until 1913, and it was fairly successful. There's still highs and lows, but very different than what you would think would come out of a Jackson protege. But yeah, it's that Mr. Potter. Mr. Potter.
No, I love that the pun too, because his rental property place is called Potter's Field, and of course that's where they you put the dead bodies or something. Like it's got a very negative connotation.
Yeah.
So that was one of my favorite. Again, like a subtle thing you pick up, that if you're a teenager and you're not as don't know how the world works, you're kind of like, yeah, whatever. But when you're older, you chuckle at that kind of ode to how bad it really was. And again, like trying to show that George Bailey is really trying to make his town better, and bring people back from the dead, if you will, in this.
Yeah. And he's George is the type of guy, he's got dreams, he's got aspirations, but He's kind of the kind of type of guy that takes care of the problems in front of him,
Mm.
before he can go off. And that's what you talked about with like his dad dying and staying in. His brother goes off and becomes a war hero and comes back and then has the opportunity to go to college. And George, all along the way, I think he has opportunities to step out from the life that he's living and go the life that he wanted to live. But each time he says no. And part of that is probably because of like honor of being the firstborn, carrying on the family legacy, like holding and shouldering that responsibility that comes with being a firstborn or the man of the house. And then part of that is it might just be because he thinks he has to, or maybe he's scared. At the end of the day, I never really considered this before, but maybe George is scared to step out. He is a big fish in a small pond in a lot of ways. And maybe that's what kind of drives him a little mad at the end, which, gets him on the bridge, is this idea that, I could have been this thing. And I never had the courage to step out and do it. And now I'm stuck here in this shoddy town and nobody appreciates me. So nobody cares that I was born. I'm gonna jump off the bridge. But luckily, thanks to an angel, we learned that George Bailey would be very much missed.
No, I think it's actually more of like a Ciceronian idea of like, you've got responsibilities, and then you have to follow through those responsibilities. And sort of, like you said, he's the oldest and the firstborn, so that just kind of things he didn't choose. Like he didn't choose to be the firstborn. He didn't choose that his parents, that his father had this building and loan. But the responsibility was put on top of him, and so he just has to do the best he can in that situation. So maybe there was a sort of woe was me fatalism to it, but I think given the time frame and sort of when the movie was made, I would say it's much more of just kind of recognizing that sometimes society can have big claims on you and you have to kind of rise to the occasion. And I think he kind of does that. And I think maybe just at the end he's just like you always say, you and I always say, like he's just tired, and it's just been one too many crises. And then you got a couple martinis in you and it's bad news. But um I think it's more just like he recognizes his responsibility towards the greater community, the Commonwealth, if you will. And like that is preserving Bedford Falls. That is, like he's always talking about like these are people's houses, these are people's mortgages. And I just, sure, I could foreclose on a mortgage, but there's a person behind that. Like there's a human being behind that mortgage that actually matters and matters to Bedford Falls. And so I'm willing to put a little bit more of my skin in the game in order to make sure that they're whole after all this. Because I know, like he's like, I'm Ernie the taxi driver. Like I know Ernie,
Hmm.
and he's good for that mortgage, even though the bank declines him. So I think it's much more of a understanding that the this sort of the civilization around you has demands, and you kind of rise to that occasion rather than just kind of being stuck, if you will. I mean, he is kind of stuck in a certain sense, but I think it's more just recognizing who he is and where he needs to be in order to help people in general.
Well, I think it ties into our idea, uncapping the house, more corporation. This idea that power should be as close to the place that it's being wielded as possible, right?
Yeah.
And because that's what George, he knows Ernie, so he trusts him more, and Ernie knows him, so he trusts him more. And that's what we should have in our local governments and our district federal government. And we don't. And even with our banks, we don't have small banks where you can kind of go to the loan and the banker and you have an established relationship. Everything's big and cold and corporate, and it's paperwork, and it's a computer algorithm making the decisions in a lot of situations, and there's no real human interaction anymore. And it's good for the people at the top because it makes things safe and easy for them. But for the people at the bottom, it makes it more difficult to break through. It makes it more difficult to have opportunity and to grow. And in a lot of ways, that's anti-American, isn't it? Because our entire country is born on this idea of you know building a business and building a life and creating opportunity, and we kind of live in a system that is almost the antithesis of that now, and it's a shame.
It's, yeah, it's kind of instead of opening up new opportunities. It's just sort of like, let's make sure that the bad things don't happen.
Well,
And again,
yes.
like you've got the insurance for the bank accounts. Like that's good. But then, like you said, like so much of it is automated, and like if you ever apply for a mortgage and stuff, like you may know the lender, but the lender has to eventually sell this mortgage to a greater, it has to be fit a particular mold, and so you have to have a certain amount of income, and you have to sort of fewer liabilities, and you have to have a credit score at a certain amount. Like it's very much a lot of it can be outside your hands depending on the situation, and then so couple that sort of things that you may not be able to control with like houses getting incredibly expensive. Like we bought our house in the fall of 2021, and at this point in 2023 for the same house there's no way we could afford it, and that's just because interest rates changed. At the same time, the market housing prices kept going up, so couple that with more expensive dollars to borrow versus and a more expensive house. Like there's just a lot of other things that you can't control, and so there are fewer opportunities for home ownership, fewer opportunities for people to make big changes in their life, and you do feel kind of like you're stuck in a treadmill waiting for to see what happens next.
Well, and you see, like, George believes in the people. Like, he believes that if you give these people the opportunity, you let them borrow the money, they will pay it back because they're good and decent people,
Yeah.
and Potter doesn't. And the whole structure of, forms and algorithms is the same way. It's
Yeah.
like, if if you are already making money and you're a safe bet to make me money, then sure, I'll lend you money.
Yeah.
But if I don't know you
Mhm.
and you don't have the degrees or the fancy things, oh, I'm going to tie something in here. I mentioned this to you earlier, Gilded Age. I know you haven't watched the show yet, but
No,
if you,
I'm like 2 episodes in. It's amazing.
okay,
I liked it so
I'm in
far.
I'm in season two, okay, and season two, there's it's not a big spoiler, but I'll share it. Is there's one of the servants has basically created this clock mechanism that works better than anything else that they've ever seen before, and so he the people around him believe in him and they give him the money to go to the patent office and file the patent so he can turn this idea into something. And the patent office says, well, you don't actually work as a clockmaker and you don't have any of the certifications, so you're not allowed to apply for the patent. It doesn't
Wow.
matter that he did the work. It doesn't matter that it works better than anything else. None of that matters. You don't have the proper certification and therefore you don't matter. And I think that is, again, it's the anti-American way, where we build this great country full of opportunity and we allow all these different members of society to have a voice and to create and grow something awesome. And then when they create and they grow something awesome, we start putting barriers in because we don't want anybody else to take it from us.
Yeah, actually, I mean, like there's like going back to the patents, like that is a key part of the Constitution, like granting sort of temporary monopolies. But I think it's sort of the permanent monopolies or the permanent class structure that can be the problem. No, I mean, I'm talking about like certifications to as a clockmaker and stuff. I think like so much of what you do, like, oh, you need a lawyer to look over that. Like you need a lawyer to just read this and make sure that you're not have any liability or there's no issues down the road or no one's going to come back and get after you. But like it's ridiculous. Like so much of what you do is just kind of like it's just a handshake and it's agreement. And if you can, I mean, like I took a business law class in college, and it was kind of eye opening, like how much of what we agree is really just like you're just kind of trust the other person. And so yeah, you get a contract, but really the contract is just sort of a stamp that I trust that this person's going to do what they say they're going to do. And then usually it's when they don't follow through, and then that's where the lawyers have to get involved, and that's where we got to get damages and figure out who's responsible and who shouldn't. Like and then then you create new laws because, oh, I can't believe that this happened, and you're cutting off opportunity left and right.
Yeah. And then the next thing you know, George is standing on the bridge
Mhm.
in snow, and he's got to have an angel come and save him.
We need more angels.
We
There's
do. We need
there's
so
lots of
many
angels.
more angels.
We just got to recognize the angels. They're all around us. Yeah.
Jeff Mayhew, Politics and Parenting here. As some of you may know, I have another podcast called What the Book with my good friend Craig T. Stewart. This month, we're reading Ender's Shadow by Orson Scott Card. And we're recording this Thursday, so I just jumped into the book, just finished chapter 1, and there was just one paragraph that really struck the politics and parenting chord with me about populism. What is populism? So let me read that for you real quick. Because these fools always look up for power. People above you, they never want to share power with you. Why you look to them? They give you nothing. People below you, you give them hope, you give them respect, they give you power. Because they don't think they have any, so they don't mind giving it up. And as you look behind me, you see those two gentlemen over my shoulder, Andrew Jackson and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and you think to yourself, what is populism? Populism is this understanding that there's always going to be a large group of people out there who feel left out. And if you can meet them on their level, if you can show them respect, which both Andrew Jackson and FDR did in different ways, they will give you power. And both of those men accumulated a lot of power. And at times they wielded it like kings. And that's why, as citizens, we are living in a populist era. And it's important that we understand who we give our power to. Well, thank you so much for letting me share a little bit about What the Book, Ender's Shadow. Look for that podcast out in December on Spotify or Substack. And as always, remember to like, subscribe, and share. Peace and love.
Speaking of people that had a tremendous impact that we've maybe forgotten a little bit about, you had got another piece published about this guy, John Bingham, and he's got many claims to fame. What would you say is his most important?
Well, I mean, so it was published
Who was John Bingham? Who was John Bingham?
So he was a congressperson. He actually held the same district in Ohio that William McKinley held. So just a lot of history there with populism and presidency right there. John Bingham was, he's a pretty smart man. Kind of one note in a lot of ways. He was an early abolitionist, and then after the Civil War, he was in Congress and he was part of the Reconstruction Committee and had the opportunity to write the 14th Amendment, essentially. Some very key verbiage in there, and his focus was extending the rights, the Bill of Rights, to every single American citizen. Because prior to that, those rights were not necessarily, the states kind of overrid them, and this kind of moved the Bill of Rights above the states and said now every single citizen was there. Now, we can look back at the 14th Amendment and the verbiage and kind of the way it went with in the Supreme Court and how it was interpreted. And we can say, well, it did a little bit more than just extend the Bill of Rights to the individual. It extended the Bill of Rights to the corporation, which we've already mentioned on the show is supposed to be limited, but is not. And I think that's kind of part of like that structural breakdown. But he was a very interesting. He tried the co-conspirators of Lincoln's assassinate, John Wilkes Booth, and all of them. That whole big, it was a plot. Like I don't know how much people know about this, but it was a plot. It wasn't just Abraham Lincoln. It was the whole cabinet. It was Ulysses Grant. It was Andrew Johnson. They were all supposed to go. Lincoln was just the only one that died that night.
Well, that's Seward gets shot in his house, and he's sitting in his bed recovering, and no one has told him that Lincoln's dead, but he knows that Lincoln's dead because he knows that if Lincoln was alive, he would be by his bedside because they were that good of friends. So yeah, it was a tremendous plot, and like all things, we find the key particulars and sort of hang on to that was just John Wilkes Booth and him jumping off the balcony and shouting "Sic Semper Tyrannis," and then the running through the Maryland countryside. But there's always bigger things around that.
And Bingham is I think he's the lead prosecutor. He's one of them. And one of the co-conspirators is a woman, and he prosecutes her. And I believe she's put to death. And this was a big deal at the time because women were not put to death. Women were not up for prosecution like this before. And Bingham, he didn't let that bother him. He he had a job to do and he had a focus, and that was, you could read the story and you could say maybe she wasn't as integral a part to
Mhm.
deserve the punishment that she got. But we're not there. We don't have all the evidence. So but it is interesting that, because I write in the article, the 14th Amendment was having trouble getting passed, and Bingham worked with other members of Congress to pass the Military Reconstruction Acts, which was a series of acts that basically kind of forced the South into uh, ratifying the 14th Amendment as is.
Right.
And I argue that wasn't necessarily the best strategy, because, like I said, force, any type of force is typically met with another force, and you're going to get rebellion. And we did in the South in a lot of different ways. And I think that there could have been a better way. But had Andrew Johnson not been president and it been Lincoln, I don't think we have that same problem. I think Lincoln is able to unite enough of the South to come on board with the 14th Amendment. Maybe the verbiage, and because one of the parts of the 14th Amendment I think that does a lot of harm to the South is the one about the debts of the war. And I understand the Northern perspective on this, and like, hey, you were a rebellious state, you caused this war. We're not going to pay. We have to pay for our own war. You have to pay for your own war. Although the North took money from the South to pay off their debts, but the
Mhm.
South wasn't able to get money from the North to pay off its debts, and they were punished in a lot of ways. And we talk about that a lot. Punishment leads to bad things,
Yeah.
and it it hurts the freemen as well, because they
Yeah.
live in the South, and it hurts the entire economy to do that. And I think that had the North had a little bit more, I don't know, forgiveness in their hearts, some
Yeah.
understanding that of the ramifications of what they were doing, I think maybe you could have had a smoother transition. Maybe force wasn't there. I think Lincoln is the type of person who would have understood that. I think Lincoln is the type of person who would have been able to, pull John Bingham aside and all the other members of the Reconstruction Acts and go, hey, let's try to find some compromise here, because we have been divided for too long. We need to really unite this country back together.
Yeah, I mean, like so I went to Virginia Tech, which is one of those land grant universities that came out of Reconstruction, where they were trying to rebuild the South, and like there's positives I think out of that, where you're trying to, you'd seed a bunch of land and hope that a university comes out of it. But I think like the other part was uh, there wasn't enough protection, I guess, for people in the South. Like if you were a Northern supporter, if you were a free man, you basically needed cavalry units around to keep you alive in some situations. Like there was a lot of still of unrest in there, and like you said, like if you kind of come at it and you force someone to agree to something, they will feel resentment, even if they're wrong, and maybe they know they're wrong, but no one likes to be treated, and which is bad to say, like the South wasn't treating people right, but like the same thing, like you can lead by example, and you can say like, look, let's reconcile on these tough issues, and hopefully that will teach you to reconcile with coming back together. And yeah, I do, and maybe even if Lincoln had been assassinated, but you didn't have a scoundrel like Andrew Johnson, maybe
Well, and I think you're right. Andrew Johnson was a scoundrel in a lot of ways and a drunk. I think is he the one? I'll have to go back and look it up, but I believe he was drunk during his presidential inauguration and he kind of just rambled on. It was just like an embarrassment. I think I remember reading, and I'm pretty sure it was him. Um, but yeah, he wasn't very good at his job. And
no.
John Bingham, I think, led his impeachment trial as well. And now the impeachment was, that was a kind of a nuts and bolts thing about the presidency and the Senate and advise and consent. But I think Johnson was right on that. But you know, it is one of those side effects of government where sometimes you can't get what you want, so you go after somebody for something else. Um,
And you use the mechanisms even in a impolitic way, and you get stuck. Gets
yeah,
tit for
which,
tat.
again, not the best way. And if we fast forward this, or we layer this over top of, like, remember the end of World War I, Woodrow Wilson, and he was trying to tell the European allies, like, hey, we gotta be fair to Germany here. The war is over. We've got everything back. We need to be fair. But the European allies, they were just really bitter, and
Mhm.
they punished Germany. And what happened? You
Came
punish
back
a
20 years
people.
later.
It's not like they came back and like were just upset about the punishment. No, they created despair in a nation, and they allowed a dictator to rise, and in the South, we didn't have a dictator rise, but we did have a lot of problems. And I
Mhm.
think that, the racial problems that we still have in our country are, directly related to the fact that we just never really handled it properly. We didn't really come to this understanding and move the country forward. We just kind of forced people to accept the rules that we put in place without actually walking people through them.
And that's so that's yeah, that's that. I mean, it was like 100 years almost if you consider like the Civil Rights Act kind of being the end, but even that doesn't solve everything. That just is another sort of that's probably and like going back to our Why Congress book, like that's a good example of really trying to find that compromise to bring people along, people giving people their chance to give their piece, so that you can say like, look, I heard you, we listened to you, and this is the way we're going to go. And like you said, like the 14th Amendment, the Reconstruction, a lot of it was kind of poison pill things that said like, if you want to be part of the country, and we just fought a war to keep you as part of this country, you have to agree to these things. And it is kind of, it's not giving people the opportunity to really come along and to change their perspective. It's just sort of them maybe grudgingly saying, oh fine, I'll do it. And like that's what a lot of you've got a lot of Confederates basically that sort of like, yeah, I'll take an oath of office that's pretty, an oath to the country that's pretty weak, and then I won't really change my beliefs, and then I'll join the Ku Klux Klan or something like that, and start ravaging the countryside. Like it's, you know, in one sense you got the laws change, but the people underneath it don't necessarily don't change and aren't congruent with those laws, and that's where you get such disaffection, discontent, and real trouble for 100 years, if you will, from Civil War to Civil Rights Act, and then beyond.
Yeah, and the laws change, but like you said, the people don't change, and the laws are not written in a way to change the people,
Mhm.
if that makes
Right,
any
because
sense.
they all require enforcement, and if the federal government didn't have enough people, and then people kind of lost, they didn't have enough soldiers, and then they kind of lost interest in sort of enforcing it, so they just sort of moved away, and then it just becomes like the
And
vacuum that gets left gets taken over.
well, and let's not forget, it's not like the North. Yes, there were a lot of abolitionists like John Bingham who went to school with a African American who, broke the color barrier at Franklin College. So John Bingham has this idea that, or understands that people of color are no different than him because he had that experience of going to school with him. And but a lot of people in the North don't really feel that way. A lot of
Mhm.
people in the North are against slavery because of, the idea of of being an American and being free and all this stuff, but they don't actually believe that people of color are equal. They don't want them to have the same rights and rules as everybody else. This just comes about because the abolitionists through the Civil War are able to kind of make their point and get what they want out of it. And it is right, people of color are just like the rest of us. We're no different. But we didn't we didn't convince enough minds in the North to help, transition through the South, and to convince the minds in the South. One of my, like, kind of history things that I like to like debate in my head is like, what if John C. Calhoun had lived long enough to meet Franklin Douglas? Because John C. Calhoun is just one of the most brilliant men that's ever walked the face of the earth. He was so smart, and he was so smart he rationalized slavery into his argument, even though it actually goes against his own, theory of government. And then that's because he doesn't have any real experience with people of color being on his level. But at the same time, he doesn't have a lot of white people that are on his level either, because that's just how smart he is. And I wonder, had he lived long enough and met um, Franklin Douglas,
Frederick
I,
Douglass.
Frederick
Fred,
Douglass, Frederick, sorry. I feel I feel like John C. Calhoun's mind might have been changed, or at least he would have had to like dig deep for a real like crazy explanation of why he was wrong right at that point. But if he had met somebody and gone, I think it would have been an eye-opening experience for him. He might have had that epiphany and be like, I've been wrong all these years. We have held them back, and that's why they don't seem as if they are equal to us. But in reality, everybody is, as the Declaration declares, all men are created equal.
Yeah, you just got to give him that opportunity. Like Frederick Douglass had the opportunity, he fought for it, he seized it, and then he became a leading speaker. And like that's like you said, like the North, a lot of the early just rhetoric around it was not really, this is a war about slavery, this is a war about the Union. And it's only like as the war progresses, and I think specifically like Lincoln seems to be getting more abolitionists talking in his ear, and then he meets Frederick Douglass multiple times, and they develop a friendship. And then he kind of realizes like, no, this war is about slavery, like that is the key issue. And then that kind of gets it. But there wasn't enough time in Lincoln's to actually convince enough people about that. It was kind of like he saw that and he was experiencing that through the war, but most people's experience with the war was just the losing family members and families breaking apart and the toll it had on the country as a whole. And I think it's one of those things, like it takes time to convince. Like Lincoln needed time to be convinced about this. And so you can imagine, like, if you're the president and you know the most about a war and you have the best information of the time, but even you have to kind of come to see where you were wrong or where the true path is. You imagine that you need the same thing for everyone in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. So John, there's like an open seat in Congress in our district. Did you know that?
I heard there's many open seats countrywide, but it is exciting that the Virginia 10 is back in play.
So there seems to be a lot of people that are just grasping for that power. Do you know how many people we have that in our district that have applied for office so far?
Is it 11? What was that? Was it like 10 the other day and now it's 11?
So we've got Jennifer Boysko.
Boysko, yeah.
Okay. These names are really hard to say, by the way.
Oh, so Fillicorn, Garay, Helmer, Call, Layton, Maldonado, Carney, Reed, and Supermanian.
He's so hard to read. And then those are the Democrats. And then Travis Nimbard just announced as well. I saw an article on Inside Nova. And then we have two Republicans, Mike Clancy and Brooke Taylor. What the heck's going on out there, John? What's in the water?
People see an opportunity, I mean, like we had, was it 11 for our contest?
Well, so where are all the Republicans at?
I think there's a person that ends with rump that's running, that's kind of scaring a lot of people away.
It's not Democrats.
Like, but fortune favors the bold, and I don't want, not that I want to convince a lot of people to run, but
well, so look at this list. Maldonado she just won a delegates race. Okay. And Helmer, the same thing.
As a first-time delegate?
No, so she got reelected. She was in the 50th, and I think her district changed. Let me look it up here real quick. Oh, VPAP's not working. Hold on. All right, I can't see it. But
no, I mean, like, a lot of these people actually won re-election. I think Eileen Fillicorn, she got redistricted out, and so maybe she lost her primary or something. She actually didn't run, but she was the former minority leader for the Democrats, and I think at one point Speaker of the House of Delegates when the Democrats were in power.
Yeah. So Maldonado,
I understand she lives in Fairfax, or at least that's where her district was.
Yeah, Maldonado is HD 50. Helmer is a delegate as well. Or is he state senator? No, he's delegate as well. And then Travis Nimbard just lost to Ian Lovejoy in a delegate race, and now he's running for Congress. I mean, how absolutely, like, why? I don't understand. You know what he should do? He should run for school board, John.
You should run for school board. You can do a lot on the school board, let me tell you.
What do you think these people are doing? Like, what's the like? What is their focus? Why are they running for office? They all say the same things. Nobody, no Republican will attack a Republican, no Democrat will attack a Democrat. There's no like real criticism of what's actually going on. It's just a whole bunch of finger pointing. Why are they running for office?
Well, I guess if you think about it, they probably think they've been doing a great job in their current seat, and I think that they deserve an opportunity to go to the next level. And that's probably what all of them have told themselves. Um, but you know, it's tough, like especially if you've already lost a race. Like, I think that's a tough sell that you should go on to the next one. But I don't know. Like politics is funny because again, like there's so much you can't control. So, you know, if you're someone and thinks, well, I'm the best person in the 10th district, and I really the people need to know me and put me on there. And then, you got to tell other people to think the same thing. And like, that's a tough, then it becomes tough. And I think looking back at our race, like, yeah, if you're not willing to kind of, I don't want to say attack someone, but it's really just trying to stick a point in there and say like why you're different. It really just becomes a beauty contest in the worst possible sense, where it's like, how can I present myself as the most partisan and the most one-sided and the most person with the fewest ideas.
Yeah, I mean, how do you feel about so Brooke Taylor and Mike Clancy for the Republicans? Are you hearing word? Is there any? I hear Alicia Andrews might enter the race. On the Democratic side, we've heard oh, what's her name? I can't think of it. Danica Rome potentially, and on the Democrat side. I mean, any other names you hear out there potentially running?
Well, I've been thinking about it, so yeah.
Oh, John's thinking about it. Oh man, you want to put your name in with that lot of 14 people or 12 people or whatever it is already. You want to go in through that? Do you have a consultant? I wrote Nimbard on Twitter. I said, the grift that everybody talks about, what it is, it's the consultants, and the marks are the candidates who are good fundraisers.
That's right.
And I said, hey, Nimbard, you just lost a delicate race and your campaign was less than inspiring, but it could be different, but you need different people consulting you. Why don't you reach out? I live in the district. I'll give you a hand.
Did he respond to you?
No, nobody responds to people. I have an R next to my name. Like, I might as well be like walking around with the scarlet R right here. Like, if I talk to a Democrat, nobody is going to talk to me. They don't care, you know. Although having an R next to your name doesn't mean the Republicans will listen to you either. So
No, it does go back to what you're going to bring along with you, and if that's a network of people that can raise money along with you.
Well, speaking of raising money, there's only one person that has money raised on this campaign finance list at VPAP. Do you know who that is?
Taylor, right?
Brooke Taylor, $31,000. Nobody else has any money raised.
Well, that's because the reports aren't in yet. Like, that's because they've all filed after the deadline. So we'll see, in a month when everything gets due.
And then we'll know who's going to win the race. The one that has the most money here is probably going to win the primaries.
But that goes back to it being a beauty contest. Like, if it truly is about a beauty contest, if you just kind of shower yourself with cash, people love that.
Well, I mean, if people give you money, you must be qualified, John.
You must. There's no other. Yeah, that's right. Because
there's no way come on. Rich people don't spend their money superfluously. They're very conscientious about where they spend their money. There's no,
as someone described to me last time, it's a lot like horse racing, where you're just sort of like, what's the horse that I'm going to put my cash behind? And it truly is like, well, if this horse has good odds, I'm going to put my money in. Like, there's very little risk taking. And I think, like, you look at some of the mechanisms that the House Republican leadership has, and I'm sure there's something similar on the Democratic side. Like, if you raise $250,000 in a quarter, you must be a good candidate, and so we'll start giving you support. But until you hit that magic threshold, there's nothing. No one cares about you at all.
So is that legal though? I've been thinking about this because of the Santos thing. And I know that the NRCC, the Young Guns program, that's what Santos was doing. He inflated his campaign numbers so he could get the money from the Republican Party. So Citizens United allows unlimited donations to political PACs because they narrow the definition of corruption to quid pro quo. This
Mhm.
for that. And it says that, indirect through political PACs is okay because now you don't have a quid pro quo. There's no give and take, so therefore it can't be corruption. But the influx of money has created campaigns or candidates that are trying to get a voice, as Santos was for whatever reason, or chasing money for whatever reason. And now it led to actual corruption, real corruption. And what he was trying to do was quid pro quo. If he could prove that he raised $250,000, they would give him more money. That's quid pro quo. Now, technically, Santos doesn't give the money to the NRCC, but
And technically, NRCC doesn't give the money to him. All they do is then they take their show pony and they start showing it to a different group of buyers
yeah,
with the imprimatur of like this person has won a
they
couple
open
heats, and so they've got good odds, as they say in the horse racing industry.
they open the door for more money to come in, right?
Mhm.
Because before you reach that barrier, which it's a wealth barrier, okay, those doors are closed to you as a candidate, as a citizen, as anybody in this country trying to run for office. They're closed unless you can open them. And it's easier for you to open them if you are wealthy and you have wealthy friends. If you're not wealthy and you don't have wealthy friends, it's going to be hard to get to that 250,000 marker. And realistically, you shouldn't need that much money to run for a primary race. Like, it's just obscene.
I mean, so much of it gets wasted on, again, like consultants and
Well, look at
uh
sorry, look
sorry.
at look at Nimbard's race out in against Lovejoy. I mean, it's a lean R district in a off year, and the campaign ads that Nimbard's team put out makes him look robotic. And I never really thought much of it until I actually got to meet him in person. And he's not robotic. He's authentic, and he's got, you know, emotion in his eyes when he speaks, and he's got facial expressions, and none of that stuff came off in any of their advertising at all. He comes off like a robot, but he's a real person. And that's where the consultants, is this whole idea of like, making things easier and scaling is to cut out all of the rough edges and make it perfect. But perfect is imperfect because we don't want perfect things. I want a diamond. I don't want a cubic zirconia, you know?
You just want that sparkle, that pizzazz. And diamonds are expensive, Jeff. Let me just say, like, you need $250,000 to get a good diamond these days.
Wow. Whoa. I don't know, man. That is some diamond.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it all goes. I imagine January 1st there'll be more names and such, and then January 15th you'll get your numbers and you'll see who's doing well. But I think maybe the Republicans in our primary weren't so willing to go after each other because it was ranked choice. But if you look at the 7th district primary, that was a massacre in terms of how nasty everything got. And I imagine with what is it, 9 Democrats running, it's going to also be or 10 Democrats running. It's going to be really nasty on the Democratic side, just
Yeah.
because they're not afraid to pull knives out. I mean, like my understanding is a lot of the people try to do what they can behind the closed doors to sort of get people to drop out. But when you don't have people dropping out, like they're not afraid to pull out the big guns.
Pull the Oppo file out and be like, hey, you've worked for us for a really long time and we have hid your dirt for you. But now that you disagree with us, guess what? Spoiled system gonna rear its ugly head. It's not your turn. Whose
Yeah,
turn is it though? Like
your school board.
if you're looking at the Democrats, which one of these people is it their turn?
If I was gonna put my finger to the wind, I'd say probably Fithercoin because she was House of Delegates and isn't actually in office at the moment. So she probably, by right, if you know the right to a particular seat, she probably has it. Um, and then going back to fundraising, I think she was a top fundraiser too. So that's why it was kind of a shock that she lost her primary. But actually, then it goes back to like people losing elections and then still running. Like she lost a primary and then she's going to run for this. So, you know, you never know. Just because you lost doesn't mean that's the end. It's always possibilities.
Yeah, I lost
You're
to
here.
everyone. You didn't. You beat me, John.
Beat you. I think that was it. No, I think I beat Brooke Taylor. That's right. So
Well, she's got another chance. I mean, she take out Mike Clancy? I mean, and in all seriousness, like I'm trying to think back, like what did Brooke and Clancy stand for? I mean, I know Clancy stood against Joe Biden, but I don't know what he stood for. And I honestly, I don't remember Brooke talking that much.
I mean, my recollection was Brooke's big point was that she was a woman going up against another woman, so that would be key. And then for Clancy, yeah, I don't remember anything in particular standing out. He made the joke that he was a lawyer, and Shakespeare said something about kill all lawyers. But I think that's not something you want to actually talk about when you're running for office. You kind of want to generally want to speak positively about yourself. So you know, the self-deprecating humor has to kind of there has to be some kind of a limit to that. Otherwise, like you put ideas in people's minds. So you know, but it's a problem. It's another lawyer running for Congress, and you know, got enough of those. Let me tell you.
Well, I mean, does he plan to write law though? You know, because that's what a congressional member should do. And you know, or
No,
does
you read Act of Congress. You don't have to write a law. You basically have your idea and you ship it off to the what's the office that writes the law for you? That like every now I can't think of the office in my head, but there's basically an office with a bunch of lawyers where you take your big idea and really, you know, more than the big idea, you take your acronym that you can kind of backfill to something, and then they just write everything for you, and then they tack on all the writers and stuff, and then
well, you know what? That's going to change soon though, because they're going to they're going to fire all those people and they're just going to hire AI to do that. So then you just take your big idea, which is not really an idea, it's just an acronym and a slogan, and then you put it into the Chat GPT, Bing AI, Microsoft legislation portal, and then it spits out a whole new law for you, and then you just
maybe
ratify it.
500 pages, you know, just to make sure that it's very comprehensive.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's got to be minimum 250 pages. Like and you know, there'll be a lot of filler, lots of repeats, lots of citing of old cases in there for no reason at all. And probably a lot of pork as well. You know, anybody that wants to touch that bill will have to go touch the Chat GBT and tell them where they live and be like, hey, put a little bit of that federal budget into my district's pocket if you want me to vote for this bill.
It's just a checkbox, you know. You get a perpetual checkbox on your office door, like yes, include me in all these pork bills because then I'll vote for it.
Oh man, that always reminds me, and I can't. I wish I knew it well enough to recite it right now, but that Alexander Hamilton quote about the pork at the from the founding. I'll have to look it up. I'll have to share it on the next show. It's such a great quote. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I I'm just I'm I'm still getting text messages and emails about elections, and the elections are over. We rolled from the state elections right into the federal elections. The people running for the state office rolled right into the federal office. There's no off season. As a citizen, you never get a time to break. You always have to be paying attention and try studying to understand so you can actually be a good steward of your responsibilities when you go to vote. And it's just exhausting, isn't it, John?
It is exhausting, but that's what keeps the establishment in power because people just tune out and then they just show up on election day or election season, as they like to
Yeah.
say.
Or election season, that's right. And that's how they make money, right? At the end of the day, the more people you can get to run for office, the more money you can fundraise because each one of those people have a different network. And inside of that network is money. And if you can pull more people into the network, pull more money out of the network, it goes into the consultants, the campaign. They don't care if you win. Let's face it, they don't. That's not their responsibility. Their responsibility is getting paid.
Sad because it's true.
I don't know. Maybe somebody should come up with an idea to change that system.
Like a kind of a reform of the financial aspects of campaign. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, like a campaign finance, I don't know, constitutional amendment of some sort. I don't know. Maybe solve the problem, or I don't know, try to remedy it.
Back to those constitutional amendments. We need more of those.
Yeah. So John, what do you got coming up? Are you off the school board now?
I have one more meeting. Well, so it depends on when you listen to this. So December 12th, it's the last meeting.
Oh
And
man.
technically, I've got a term until December 31st at midnight. So be toasting in the new year and toasting in the end of 4 years of interestingness. No, we all get this opportunity to give comments at the end, and I just kind of thinking of there's this quote that I was thinking of when I was running for office, because there was some kind of like, the school board seemed like it was in turmoil, but in reality it was just so quaint. But just because the quote is, just because you can't control the winds doesn't mean you give up the ship. And I was like, yeah, no, there's, this person got off the school board and then some got replaced, and that changed the makeup of it, and it's different. Like that's tough, but you got to hang in there. And that quote has never been more true, honestly, after 4 years on the school board. There's just stuff you can't control, and I think that requires a bit of humility that I think is so lacking in politics, where you understand, like, you've got ideas, going back to George Bailey. Let's bring it all back to George. You've got grand ideas. You're going to get in there. You're going to get rid of whatever pet project that is driving you crazy, and you're going to add a new initiative that's going to change everything. And then that hits the brutal reality of like life and working with 8 other people and trying to manage a bureaucracy and trying to understand a 1 point something billion budget depending on the year. And like, sometimes you just have to not really settle, but just kind of be content with what little bit you can do, because that's kind of what was available. And so, like, that's what I've gained. That's the wisdom I've gained in my 4 years of the school board is there's a lot that you can't control, and you have to make the best of what you can. And I think as I've thought over the 4 years, I think that's what I've done the best. And it's, fun little things that you can point to. And then, trying to be a friend with other board members, even if you don't have the same letter next to your name on the ballot, because they're people too, and they have the same dignity and respect. And you can't, you got to give them the benefit of the doubt until they really disappoint you, maybe, and then you just you do what you can. But I think, like, that's another part that's missing, is sort of, yes, they're not the same team, but technically we're all playing for the same country, and we all have to remember that at the end of the day. Like, it's, yeah, just because you don't agree on one particular issue doesn't mean you can't agree on 10 other issues, honestly.
Yeah. Well, we kind of lost that, haven't we? It is more like you agree with me or you don't agree with me. It's all or nothing. It's all about power now. And I mean, it always is about power, but there's always in societies and governments, there's always this balance line, and at some point you cross a threshold, and it seems like people are scared to retreat back, to give up power and be like, hey, that's not really what the objective is. It's not about gaining power and getting what we want. It's about having debate and compromise and writing legislation and working together. And you have a whole generation that's grown up and they don't even remember that, and kind of it makes it hard to go back to that moment. And hopefully we can get there sooner than later.
That's why it's important to talk about it. I mean, like, just reminding people that the situation we're in now was never it's not a perpetual thing. Like, the world changes, life changes, people change. And as you like to talk about, like, the Reed's rules in Congress, like, those were rules that were just put in place that's not in the Constitution. It's just one guy who thought, like, this would make my job so much better. And we just need another person in charge to say, like, no, this will make my job so much better. Or actually, no, I think what you got to say is the speaker has to have the humility to say, like, it's not about me, it's about the country. and then it's
Yes.
going to make the country better. It's going to make my job more difficult, perhaps, but it's better for everyone. And I think that's what's missing.
That's exactly it. It is going to make the speaker's job more difficult. They're going to have to talk to more people. They're going to have to build coalitions and compromises across party lines to get anything done. That's how the system was designed. It was not designed to be easy for the person in charge. If you want easy, then don't be the person in charge. Being the person in charge is hard. It's a lot of responsibility, and you have to wield that responsibility responsibly. Otherwise, people's rights get infringed, and people get upset, and they get frustrated, and you have bad things that happen in your country.
Yeah, that's true. If you want an easy job, just become a dictator, right? That's
Well, it's easy until the end, right? Never ends well for the dictators, does it?
not easy. Either in jail or beheaded, I think is kind of.
Sometimes they get found in a hole. Or, well, he wasn't a dictator. I was gonna say dumped in the ocean, but that was just a completely, a dictator of his clan, right? All right, John. What do you think? Was that a good show?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I've been I put out a little blurb earlier today. We'll throw it into the pod about upcoming What the Book podcast. Will be out in December. We're reading Ender's Shadow. And for the politics and parenting fans out there, you might want to take a listen to this one. There's a great little snippet about power and how the different ways that power is obtained and gained. And it just reminded me a lot of populism. So you'll have to check it out.
Can't wait.
And also, you can check out the article John Bingham in the Freeman newsletters. That's on Substack. You can find it there. It's a great little outfit. Justin Stapley has kind of put it on. I kind of met him on Twitter. He's got a lot of really talented writers writing just great, thoughtful pieces on there. I highly recommend that you go on and subscribe, like, and share that publication as well. And you can find us at Politics and Parenting on Substack and on Spotify. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Peace and love.